Okay, so this poorly sewing machine was brought to me yesterday with a complaint which is quite common, which is problems with the bobbins. So threads looping, threads snapping, just generally bad stitches. So I just want to talk you through some of the basic stuff that is commonly wrong with sewing machines. So it came to me without a lid on, so what you see is what you get here. It appeared that the people that were using it before were using a bobbin on top instead of a cone of thread, so that never really helps because it doesn't take the thread through very nicely. So I saw a few other things instantly that weren't quite right, so I don't know if you can actually see. Let me bring the machine a little bit closer to you. No, that's not working. Let me tilt the camera up. If you look at the tension up here, the tension on most modern sewing machines should just be left on 4. This one is on 1. So I presume that was done to counteract all kinds of nonsense going on in the bobbin area, and they were obviously hoping that that would help. Now, if the bobbin tension is fine, then the top tension should be fine on 4, but I will talk you through bobbin tension in a minute. So I haven't done any diagnostics yet. I don't really know what's wrong with it, so let's talk through all the things that I would do to help this poorly baby get back on its feet. So I would always check the needle first, so use pinky finger or ring finger to just run along the end of the needle. If you feel any kind of roughness, or if it's not sharp anymore. This isn't massively sharp, so if it's blunt or damaged, it could definitely cause tension problems. So let's just take that out and replace it. Sometimes that's literally all it needs, so let's have a little gander. There we go, here's one I prepared earlier. So it is extremely important to always use decent needles. I highly recommend Smetch. I used to buy organ needles, but their quality has gone down considerably, I've found, over the years. And now out of a box of 100, I sometimes get 50 that are blunt, even just straight out of the box. So don't be tempted to buy needles on the market or in a cheap shop, because they often, I've even seen ones without an eye or without a point, so that's obviously not in fact a needle. So it does appear to run reasonably freely, but it is, I think it's also quite mucky. So let's take everything apart. So underneath here, take the catches off, take the bobbin out, take everything out. Now you can have a good look inside. You probably can't see in here. It looks a little dusty, but nothing major. So just get a little paintbrush out to give it a little dusting. If it's really bad, what I tend to do is just get some compressed air like this. So I just buy this in bulk online, or I used to buy it at Maplin's, but obviously that doesn't exist anymore. But this one doesn't look too bad, but let's have a look under the stitch plate, see what's going on underneath there. So let's have a look if I can get in there. Nope, not the right screwdriver. It's quite tricky to find screwdrivers that are strong enough and short enough to get in there, so I find these really useful. They often come with sewing machines, but you can also buy them. A lot of modern sewing machines tend to come with it just a tiny little metal triangle which has an edge that fits exactly into here. I wish you could actually buy those online. I'm sure you can, I've just never been able to find them. So, oh, wow, that's tight. That obviously has either never been removed or not in a long time. So, really important to keep your screws somewhere safe, because they're quite annoying if you've lost them. Alright, let's have a look underneath here. Now, I'm going to bring this camera in a little bit nearer, so you can have a look. Is it focusing? Yeah. It's a little bit mucky. Again, I've seen worse, but it could do with a little dusting, just because we're there anyway. I'm not suggesting that that's actually the issue right now, but like I said, we're here, we might as well give it a little bit of a clean. because I have this fabulous can of compressed air, just going to give it a little bit of a squirt around the back there. Oh yeah, some fluffs. They can actually cope with quite a lot of dirt before it stops them working properly, so I really don't think that that's the issue. So I'm just going to have a quick look up here, this little thingy here, just give it a little bit of a wipe with my hand. If it's really bad, actually I can see some rust in there, so that's not great. I'm just going to give that a little bit of a scrape. So rust obviously causes all kinds of friction, so it's not going to stop the machine working, but if it catches the thread or it stops the bobbin from turning, then that's obviously not a good idea. Right, let's have a look at the rest of this. So here's the bobbin case. If you can see, the bobbin has actually got some rust on it as well, which obviously wouldn't help. And inside, yeah, pretty scruffy actually. So this may be actually the cause of the problem. So I'm just going to see what happens if I give that a little bit of a... I know it's... my dad would absolutely hate me for being so casual in removing rust. He would probably have a tool for this, but most people won't have anything like that, and this will usually just do a good enough job. So just give it a little bit of a scrape. It will definitely make it behave a little bit better than it was before. The other thing I have is emery board, and I literally just I get a bunch of cheap nail files from the pound shop, and just pull off, well, that didn't work so well, so I just pull off a bit of the actual sandpapery stuff if I can get to it. Some of them are better than others, some of them peel away quite easily. This one doesn't want to play ball, so if I can peel some off, that's great. If not, I just try and get that in and give that a little bit of a sanding just to smooth it over, because that's the problem with rust really, it just makes everything quite rough. So we'll see if that's done the job. Now this thingy here, really important that this functions properly, because this is what makes all the bobbins spin round. So inside here, not too bad actually, but the thing to really watch out for, and this happens quite often, let's get it in focus. So this thing here, this hook, is the thing that picks up the top thread. So if you have repeatedly, or even once but quite hard, smash the needle onto this bit here, this often feels really rough. This one doesn't actually, but I tend to, if it feels a bit, just give it a bit of a sand. Again, just some nail files will do just fine. Just smooth it all over, because this needs to be smooth. If this is barbed, it will catch your thread and snap it, and do all kinds of weird things with it in the process. So now let's put the whole thing back together. Just going to tilt the machine back a little bit. Hope you can see. So in here is the half moon of the hook system that stays inside the machine. And we've got this part here, which basically makes up the other half of that circle. Hold it in the middle by the spindle. I know my hand's in the way. I will show you how it works. Just put it in there. It doesn't really click into space, which is why it's definitely easier to either put your machine completely on its back or at least tilt it back a little bit. Okay, so then the next thing is this part here. This hole you can see on the top here is the bit that goes in on top. These bits here, the sticky outy bits, need to face you. So beware that the thing you've just put in is in there fairly loose. So be careful putting this in. There you go, and then do not forget to put the catchers on. Actually, I do tell a lie. I had done, when I found this machine, when I looked at it this morning, these catchers weren't on properly. They were, I can't even do it now, they were down here somewhere. So if this isn't in securely, that can definitely cause all kinds of problems. So the next thing we're going to look at is the bobbin. A lot of the time people bring in machines with supposedly that are broken, but actually what's often going on is something to do with the bobbin. So quite often I find there's bobbins in there that don't fit the machine. So this is a standard size bobbin, which is probably what, I don't know, 90% of the machines on the market use. But you find older machines, especially older Singer machines, often use a completely different size, so they might not be as high, they might not be as wide. So if you're using a bobbin in your machine that's the wrong size, if it's too small, it wobbles around and causes tension problems. Obviously, if it's too big, it doesn't spin properly and causes problems as well. I'm a little bit concerned about the state of this bobbin because it is quite rusty. It wouldn't spin so nicely if it was rusty. So I'm just going to find another bobbin that fits that. Luckily, bobbins are something I have absolutely tons of. There we go. That one is the same, but slightly better. So it's got some thread on there. I would always advocate to use exactly the same thread on top as on the bobbin. That causes a huge amount of problems if you have the wrong thread. You know, say you've got something beautiful and expensive on here, like a Gutermann thread or what have you, and then on top you've got something that you've inherited from your granny and it's 100% cotton and it's prone to snapping and it's really chunky. Then they definitely won't play with each other very nicely, and that can cause tension problems in itself. Right, okay, so what I've got on here is a cheap moon thread, Coates moon thread. It's absolutely fine for most purposes, and I've got some that matches that to put on top as well. Right, so I'm just going to have a little chat about bobbin tension here. So if your machine, straight out of the factory, and probably the first 10 years that you have it, the tension is set, should be set in the factory, and it should just be correct. The correct tension means if you hold it like this and jingle it, it should ever so slightly fall down. This is doing nothing at all, which basically means that the bobbin tension is far too tight. The thread just isn't coming out. To adjust that, it's the kind of thing that happens over time. So if it hasn't been done in 20 years or 10 years, depending on how much you use your machine, you will definitely need to adjust that. So this is a good way to check. There's a little screw just there that you use to adjust the tension. So I've got a little flathead screwdriver, and it's just a little bit of an experiment. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you know, over tighten or under tighten initially. You know, there is no kind of measuring system on there, so you just, wow, that screw is in really tight. It won't even turn. There we go, I think. Is that right? Right, don't know what happened there. It just turned off. Right, I've managed to loosen the screw a little bit. That's a little bit better. It's now actually just slowly moving down. I'm just going to loosen it a little bit more. Basically, if the bobbin tension is too tight, that might be a little bit too loose actually. If the bobbin tension is too tight, not putting enough bobbin thread into the stitch, and sometimes it causes the top thread to loop underneath, etc, etc. It basically causes tension problems. So now that we've got this correct, hopefully, it's not an exact science. It's definitely better now than it was, but we might have to adjust that a little bit more. Right, let's put the stitch plate back in. I'm going to put this top tension back on 4 because that's where it should be. And then let's put some thread in there. There we go. So it's obviously important to use a semi-decent... Yeah, I find often people they're not really entirely sure what's on their bobbin, or they're not really entirely sure what thread they're using on top. They're not really too sure where it came from. And thread, again, is a big factor. If you use rubbish thread, then you're going to get rubbish stitching. It's as simple as that. So it doesn't even have to be expensive thread, because this stuff here is like 70p for 500 meters, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, I wouldn't use it for dressmaking, but it's perfectly fine for most other things. Even things like cushions and quilts and stuff, it's definitely strong enough for that. So let's have a little test run and see where we're at with this girl. I think that might have just been it. Okay, so the important things is thread, needle, make sure your top thread matches your bobbin thread, make sure you've got the correct bobbin in there, make sure you thread the bobbin up properly as well. I'll run that through that again actually, because this is something I did sort of skip over a little bit. So your bobbin thread, if you can see it because it's white thread, your bobbin thread needs to come off the bobbin, over the top, to the left, and then down. And then it goes in your bobbin case, like so. Yeah, so it comes off anti-clockwise. And you find that groove there, and you pull it from that groove into that space there. And then it goes off to the left of the sticky uppy bit, and then you push the bobbin all the way in. Always do a little check. It should move a little bit, but it shouldn't spin any further than that. So now let's pull that thread up to the top. Hold your top thread and then turn the hand wheel. So now that your machine is threaded up, only ever turn the hand wheel towards you, anti-clockwise. It definitely won't work very well. So now that we've got the machine all threaded up, let's give it a little test run and see how she's behaving. So, really important to stop any tension issues or any weird stuff happening at the beginning of your sewing. Don't start right on the edge of your fabric. Always make sure that your fabric covers at least 3/4 of your presser foot, the thing that you're sewing with. Make sure your thread actually is through the centre of your foot and out towards the back. Then always start by turning your needle down into the fabric, and you do that by turning your hand wheel towards you. Then the final step is you grab those 2 threads, or if you're in the middle of a project and you can only find your top thread, just grab that and just give it a tug, okay? All that extra thread that you pull out is the stuff that could otherwise cause tangles. So once you've done all of that, you should find that it will start without a hiccup, rather than scrunching up and causing problems. Let's have a look. Oh, she's not sounding very happy. I think she could do with some more cleaning and some oiling, but tension-wise, we're cooking on gas. She's absolutely perfect. So some machines just are noisy. I have a few machines that are noisy like that. There doesn't appear to be an awful lot you can do about them. I've got one that's, you know, lovely John Lewis sewing machine. It's just about 9 years old, I think. I've used it for a lot of classes, and it just is noisy. And I've cleaned it and I've oiled it. She's working beautifully. She just doesn't sound so good. But, you know, I don't sound so good anymore either, now that I'm 50. So she's behaving beautifully. I will give her an extra little bit of a clean and a bit of an oil, but on the whole, she's fixed. So that is what it takes, okay? Decent thread, even if it's cheap stuff. None of your pound shop or unknown make or supermarket thread tends to be awful. Neil needle, Smet's needle. If you're not entirely sure, even if the needle feels okay, if you've tried everything else and it's still not working very well, do change the needle, because sometimes the machine picks up on issues with the needle that you cannot feel, because they're quite delicate creatures, really. And then make sure you've got the correct bobbin on, you've got the same thread on the bobbin as on top. Make sure you've wound your bobbin up properly. If your bobbin isn't winding properly and it's all scrunched up on there, all loose, then that will cause tension issues. Make sure your bobbin area is kind of clean, although that's not usually an issue, really. Although here, the rust might have not worked. Check your bobbin tension, and then make sure that your top tension, let's go up there again, whoops, too much. Your top tension up here should be on 4, okay? Once that's all set, then if the tension is still not great with your top tension on 4, keep fiddling with your bobbin tension until it's correct, okay? Your tension is correct when your top stitch and your bottom stitch look the same, okay? You shouldn't be able to tell. If there is loops underneath your work, then tighten your bobbin tension up. No, loosen your bobbin tension a little bit more. If your work is starting to pucker and it looks like your top thread is laying on top of your work rather than being, you know, stitching properly, then loosen your bobbin tension a little bit. But it's quite a wide range it's got, so if you get it roughly right, it will probably look absolutely fine. Any questions, just ping me a message.